had fallen over the Tennessee frontier. The Bell family farm lay quiet under a canopy of autumn trees, the only sound the distant cry of owls and the slow rush of the Cumberland River. But inside the Bell farmhouse, John Bell stirred uneasily in his bed. Something had awakened him, a sound, faint but deliberate. It wasn't the chirping of crickets or the howl of wolves from the woods. This was different. It was the unmistakable sound of gnawing, as if invisible teeth were chewing at the posts of his bed. He sat up, straining his ears. The gnawing grew louder, moving across the floorboards, then up along the wall. He lit a lantern and searched every corner of the room, but nothing stirred. No animal, no thief, no intruder. And yet, the sound persisted. At first, the Bell family brushed it aside. A rat, perhaps, a trick of the old wood expanding in the night. But the disturbances grew worse. Soon it was not gnawing, but chains. Heavy, dragging chains that rattled across the floor, echoing through the house at night. The children woke in terror, swearing they heard someone pacing their rooms. Bedsheets were yanked violently, hair pulled in the dark, and whispers, soft, sinister whispers, slithered through the silence. By day, John Bell walked his property with unease. Strange things were happening to the farm animals. Hens were found twisted and lifeless in their coops, their necks wrung without explanation. Horses startled at unseen hands tugging their bridles. Even the crops seemed touched by something unnatural. Stalks bent as if a great weight had pressed them flat in the night. At first, John tried to keep the strange happenings quiet. In early 19th century Tennessee, talk of witches or ghosts could destroy a man's reputation. But his children, especially young Betsy, grew pale with fright. They spoke of voices calling their names, disembodied laughter echoing in their ears. And worse, sometimes they saw things, shadowy figures flitting between the trees, gone before they could blink. The Bell family prayed, but the prayers seemed only to enrage whatever lingered there. Each night, the disturbances escalated. Scratches along the walls, slaps across faces, bruises appearing on Betsy's arms where unseen fingers had pinched her. The neighbors began to notice too. Visitors to the Bell home reported feeling icy drafts in rooms where no windows were open. Some even fled in the middle of the night, vowing never to return. And then, it spoke. One night, after weeks of torment, the Bell family gathered at their table. The room was quiet, every candle flame flickering low, and out of the stillness came a voice. It wasn't the faint whisper they had heard before, but a sharp, clear voice, rasping, mocking, inhuman. "I am a spirit," it announced. "I was once happy, but I have been disturbed." The Bells froze in silence, their blood running cold. The entity laughed, the sound crawling like ice down their spines. From that moment on, there was no denying it. This was no animal, no dream, no trick of the mind. Something had entered their home, and it had no intention of leaving. Night after night, the voice grew bolder, carrying on long conversations, mocking prayers and hurling curses. It knew secrets no stranger could have known. It sang hymns, recited scripture, and sometimes it threatened. But the most terrifying part was not what it said, but whom it seemed to hate most. For as time went on, its rage turned toward two targets, young Betsy Bell and her father, John. The neighbors began whispering. Was this truly the work of a witch, a restless soul, or something far more sinister? The Bell family would soon find out, but at a terrible cost. Bell family tried to maintain their routines, but life inside their Tennessee farmhouse was no longer ordinary. The voice that had once spoken sporadically now made itself a constant presence. Sometimes, it whispered directly into Betsy's ear, so close she swore she could feel a cold breath against her skin. Other times, it erupted with mocking laughter that filled the entire room, rattling glass and startling every listener. The family's neighbors grew curious, then horrified as word spread. Brave men ventured into the Bell home, daring to hear the entity for themselves. And they did. The spirit spoke to them as clearly as any living person would. It recited entire sermons word for word, as though it had been present in church that very morning. It mimicked voices of local townsfolk, imitating them with such perfection that even friends were fooled. The longer it stayed, the sharper and more intelligent it seemed to become. But for Betsy, the youngest daughter, there was no curiosity, only terror. The attacks on her body grew crueler. While sitting at the hearth, she would suddenly be struck across the face. leaving bright red welts that everyone could see. Invisible hands yanked at her hair, pulling her to the floor. At night, she awoke to the feeling of fingers gripping her throat, choking her as she struggled for breath. Her cries echoed through the house, and the family would rush to her side, only to find her writhing against unseen force. The spirit seemed to relish her suffering. "Poor little Betsy," it taunted. "She'll never know peace." The assaults became so frequent that Betsy grew frail. Her once bright face turned pale, and her eyes carried the exhaustion of someone twice her age. Still, she endured, and her family could do nothing but watch in helpless despair. John Bell, too, began to feel the brunt of the spirit's wrath. Where it struck Betsy with violence, it tormented John with slow, merciless cruelty. His limbs grew weak, tremors shook his hands until he could barely hold his tools. His tongue swelled at odd hours, slurring his speech and leaving him unable to communicate. At times, he fell into sudden, paralyzing seizures. The doctors of the time had no explanation, but the spirit? It claimed responsibility. "I will kill John Bell," it declared more than once, its voice ringing through the house with chilling certainty. "He will never escape me." Despite the growing dread, the Bell home became a place of eerie fascination. People traveled from miles around, desperate to witness the phenomenon. Preachers, skeptics, neighbors, even politicians gathered in the candlelit farmhouse, and nearly all of them left believing that something unexplainable dwelled there. The entity, now widely whispered about as the Bell Witch, seemed to thrive on the attention. It debated theology with ministers, laughed at skeptics, and revealed secrets from visitors' pasts. One traveler who mocked it found himself thrown violently to the ground, his pride shattered before a stunned audience. Another begged it for proof, only to watch a candlestick lift itself from the table and smash against the wall. Still, the Bell family suffered most. Betsy's torment continued relentlessly, and John's health declined. The spirit's laughter followed him even as he struggled in his fields. His once strong voice faltered, his body betraying him more with each passing day. And yet, no matter how weakened he became, the entity only grew stronger. One particularly chilling night, Betsy screamed from her bed. Her brothers rushed in and froze at the sight before them. She was levitating. Her body hovered above the mattress, limbs stiff as though held by invisible ropes. Her hair fanned out wildly, as if caught in some unseen storm. The family tried to pull her down, but their hands passed through nothing but air. After what felt like an eternity, she collapsed back onto the bed, gasping for breath. The witch laughed, a sound so cruel and triumphant that even the bravest Bell child wept. The haunting was no longer confined to the Bell property. Neighbors began reporting strange events of their own. Some claimed to hear phantom voices calling to them in the woods. Others awoke to find their livestock mutilated. The entire Red River community buzzed with fear. The Bell Witch was no longer a private affliction. It was a public curse. And through it all, the spirit's hatred for John Bell grew clearer, sharper, and more dangerous. Every insult, every threat carried the same message. His end was near. The Bells prayed, sought counsel, even considered leaving their home. But the voice mocked them at every turn. "You cannot escape me," it hissed. "This land is mine, this family is mine, and John Bell's life belongs to me." The family was trapped in a nightmare without end. Betsy's youth was stolen by fear, John's strength drained from his body day by day. And still, the Bell Witch grew bolder, more powerful, and more determined. The question was no longer if tragedy would strike, but when. The Bell household was no longer just a home. It had become a stage where fear played its cruel performance, night after night. By now, nearly everyone in the Red River community knew of the Bell Witch. What had started as whispers among neighbors had grown into a tale so widely spread that strangers traveled long distances to witness the horrors for themselves. And the witch? She welcomed them. Visitors described the presence as intelligent, cunning, and disturbingly conversational. Ministers who came to pray over the family found themselves debating scripture with the unseen voice. The witch quoted verses with flawless precision and twisted them into mockery. "Do you think your prayers will drive me away?" it sneered. "I was here before you, and I'll be here long after." Even skeptics, men of reason, hardened farmers, and officials, left shaken. They entered the Bell home with laughter, calling the stories nonsense. But when the spirit repeated their private conversations from days earlier, or when chairs slid violently across the floor, that laughter quickly died. Some fell to their knees in fear, others fled without looking back. Still, the witch saved her darkest torments for the family themselves. Betsy Bell, now a teenager, bore the brunt of its cruelty. She was slapped so often that bruises patterned her face like cruel fingerprints. Her hair was pulled until tufts were left behind on the floor. She vomited after nights of relentless choking attacks, her body trembling under invisible hands. But Betsy's suffering wasn't just physical. The witch turned its malice toward her heart as well. When Betsy became engaged to her childhood sweetheart, Joshua Gardner, the spirit erupted in fury. No, she will never marry him, it shrieked, shaking the walls so violently that plaster rained from the ceiling. From that moment forward, the haunting grew vicious whenever Joshua visited. Doors slammed shut to separate them. Betsy was attacked more violently than ever. Joshua, once strong and protective, was powerless to stop it. The message was clear. Betsy's happiness would not be allowed. Meanwhile, John Bell's health spiraled downward. He grew frail, often bedridden, his face pale and sunken. Seizures racked his body, and his tongue swelled so badly that he struggled to eat or speak. To those who loved him, it looked like slow poisoning, and the witch admitted as much. "Old Jack Bell," it taunted, "will breathe no more soon." The Bell children, once playful and bright, lived in a constant state of fear. They refused to sleep alone. At night, they huddled together in the corner of a single room, while the witch's laughter echoed from the rafters. Sometimes, they would hear the distinct sound of chains dragging across the floorboards, as though prisoners walked the halls. Other times, they were awoken by blood-curdling screams from empty rooms. Neighbors tried to support the family, but even they began to feel cursed simply by association. Horses refused to enter the Bell property, rearing back in panic. Crops withered for no clear reason. The land itself seemed poisoned by the presence. Despite the horror, some were fascinated. Among the visitors was General Andrew Jackson, the man who would later become President of the United States. Intrigued by the stories, Jackson and his men traveled to the Bell farm. But as they approached the property, their horses suddenly froze, refusing to move forward. The wagons creaked, the animals strained, but they would not budge. Jackson reportedly exclaimed, "By the eternal, this must be the place." The witch, apparently amused, allowed them entry. That night, Jackson's men dared the spirit to show itself. One soldier bragged of his bravery, claiming he could face any ghost. Moments later, he screamed in agony as unseen forces beat him and dragged him across the floor. Jackson, unnerved, is said to have declared, "I would rather fight the entire British army than the Bell Witch." By morning, he and his men fled. Stories like these spread, amplifying the legend. But to the Bells, it was no legend. It was daily life. The torment escalated through the winter of 1820. John Bell's condition became critical. His children described him as wasting away before their eyes, the strong patriarch now reduced to a ghost of himself. And always, always, the voice of the witch rang out, "I'll see him in the grave." Then, in December, the final blow came. John Bell slipped into a coma. His family gathered around, praying desperately, but there was no saving him. When they checked his medicine bottles, one was mysteriously filled with a dark, foul-smelling liquid they had never seen before. The witch laughed, triumphant. "I gave him that. I fixed old Jack." John Bell died on December 20th, 1820. At his funeral, mourners wept as the coffin was lowered into the ground. But their grief was interrupted by a voice, the witch, singing loudly and mockingly. Hymns twisted into cruel parodies filled the air, echoing through the graveyard until the last mourner left in dread. The spirit had won, but its victory did not mean an end. Betsy Bell, devastated by years of torment, broke off her engagement to Joshua Gardner. She believed the witch would never allow her peace if she married him. Brokenhearted, Joshua left, and Betsy's young life was marked forever by tragedy. The Bell Witch had destroyed John Bell and shattered his family. Yet even after its declared mission was complete, it did not vanish entirely. Witnesses continued to hear its voice, see its tricks, and feel its presence. The legend only grew darker, and perhaps the most terrifying part, the witch itself promised it was not gone for good. Though John Bell was buried, the Bell Witch was not. The spirit's chilling declaration at his death, "I fixed old Jack," was not the end of its story. Instead, it became the beginning of a legend that would echo for centuries. For months after John Bell's funeral, the witch lingered. Its voice still filled the Bell household, taunting the grieving family. Betsy continued to suffer, her nights stolen by unseen tormentors. And yet, slowly, the intensity began to fade. Some neighbors whispered that the witch had achieved its goal and would finally rest, but the witch itself had other plans. Before it vanished, it made a promise. It would return in 7 years. True to its word, in 1828, the spirit reappeared. For several weeks, it plagued John Bell Jr., engaging him in deep philosophical conversations about life, death, and destiny. This time, it seemed less violent, more curious, but no less unsettling. Then, just as suddenly, it disappeared again. Before leaving, it offered a final warning. It would return again, this time in Wandern 7 years. That meant the year 1935. And indeed, in 1935, strange stories surfaced around the Bell farm once more. Locals reported hearing the same phantom voices, the same heavy footsteps across empty rooms, and the same mocking laughter that had terrified their ancestors. Farmers claimed livestock went missing without explanation. Travelers swore they saw a shadowy figure drifting along the Red River. Even today, more than 200 years later, the land where the Bells once lived remains steeped in fear. The old Bell farm is long gone, but a mysterious cave on the property, known as the Bell Witch Cave, has become the heart of the legend. Visitors who dare to enter often leave with stories of their own. Some describe being touched by cold, invisible hands. Others hear whispers in the dark or see flickering lights deep within the cave's tunnels. Skeptics dismiss these tales as superstition, but the sheer number of reports keeps the legend alive. And those who mock it sometimes pay a price. There are stories of tourists who ridiculed the witch inside the cave, only to suffer accidents or misfortune days later. Car crashes, broken bones, sudden illnesses, coincidences perhaps, but eerily reminiscent of the curses tied to Annabelle or other infamous hauntings. What makes the Bell Witch so terrifying, even compared to other legends, is its intelligence. Unlike a mindless haunting that repeats the past, the witch seemed aware, purposeful, and vindictive. It conversed, it remembered, it hated. And perhaps it still does. Generations of Tennessee locals have grown up with the warning, do not provoke the Bell Witch. Some say the spirit lies dormant, waiting for another chance to unleash its fury. Others believe it roams freely, its energy diffused into the land itself, feeding on fear. The haunting has inspired countless books, films, and investigations. Yet, despite all the research, no one has uncovered the true origin of the spirit. Was it really the ghost of Kate Batts, the neighbor accused of cursing John Bell? Was it a demon disguising itself as a witch? Or was it something far older, something tied to the land before settlers ever arrived? What we do know is this: the Bell Witch has become one of America's most enduring ghost stories. And like all great legends, it is dangerous not because of what has been proven, but because of what can never be disproven. So tonight, as you listen to the rain and let the shadows of history wash over you, remember the voice that mocked, the hands that struck, and the hatred that lingered for decades. Imagine being in that quiet Tennessee farmhouse, hearing the laughter in the dark, and ask yourself, if the Bell Witch promised to return again, do you believe it's still out there, waiting? What do you think? Was the Bell Witch a spirit, a demon, or something even more ancient? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to tell me where in the world you were watching from. If you love haunted history, make sure to subscribe, because the next story might just be darker than this one.